Hello, you're watching my YouTube channel. I'm your host, kamranarshad. Today, I have invited a guest to my vlog, and I'm going to discuss his life, vision, goals, and most importantly, his field. So, good morning, and thank you for joining us today. We are delighted to have sports writer Christopher Gerlacher, a seasoned professional covering the sports betting industry across UK markets. To kick off our conversation, could you share a bit about your journey and what do you use to specialize in sports writing with a focus on the dynamic world of sports betting?
Um, yeah, well, my journey to sports betting was really roundabout. I started as a freelance writer straight out of college, and I did some odd jobs like, resume and LinkedIn writing, and I did video captioning for a little bit. Um, but I was hired for a content writing job on a freelance basis for a group of sports betting sites, and this was in April 2020 that I started freelancing, and I live in Colorado, and my state launched sports betting the next month.
Okay.
Um, but I was plucked off I was discovered on from an article I'd written just about freelancing straight out of school and trying to pursue nonfiction and fiction at the same time and just trying to make some writing work.
Okay,
And that freelance job eventually turned into a full-time job, and I've been writing about sports betting ever since.
okay, fair enough. Actually, first of all, okay, tell me, how does the sports writer stay updated on the latest trends, new developments in the sports betting industry, especially within the diverse US market, Christopher?
The trick to it is to cover the newest state that's launching sports betting next.
Okay,
Because if you've covered them before, like I have, then you'll see, what's different in this new state and what regulators have learned from previous states. So, when Ohio launched sports betting, they banned risk-free language from sports betting advertisements, which, it sounds like a minor thing, but it had been a brewing issue for several months within the industry. And Ohio regulators were the first American market to, crack down on it, and all the other regulators followed suit. So some of those changes you'll see very organically and very quickly when they occur. But it's those new markets that teach you everything you need to know.
okay. How is your experience so far?
How's the experience so far?
Yeah,
Really good. I mean, it's there are always new challenges within the sports betting industry. Advertising language has been largely solved. Some of the new issues, there's going to be new responsible gambling issues. So, some of the things that are probably going to get looked at, one big one would be, is legal advertising on college campuses driving, underage college students to register for offshore sports books, for example? That's a big unanswered question that, some in the responsible gambling space have taken interest in, but I think underage gambling will be one of the next big issues to be confronted head on. But it's always evolving, so there's always some new issue to keep up with, and that's, from a writer's perspective, that's a really enjoyable part of the job.
okay, fair enough. Okay, can you please highlight the writer's approach to balancing informative content with engaging storytelling when covering the sports betting landscape?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to just, throw numbers at your readers, because then it's too dry, and you can't have, only emotional stories, because those stories need context and numbers as well. The trick to it for me is to, find a way to make the numbers mean something. So whenever there are stories about um, the increase in responsible gambling helpline calls in new markets, you can talk about what the impact of problem gambling is on friends and family and workplaces and on problem gamblers themselves. And then when you say, there's a 2 or 3 times increase in the number of problem gambling helpline calls, that's not just a number anymore. It has meaning behind it.
Okay,
So you turn the number into something concrete and human instead of just, a stat with a big percentage sign at the end.
okay,
And for
fair
some
enough.
other numbers, it's easy. Yeah, I mean, tax revenue you don't have to explain to create meaning for. That's always a story. So sometimes it's easy.
Sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's difficult, right?
Right.
Okay, when you feel that it is gonna difficult for you, then how do you handle the stress or anxiety to get that?
You
Did
say
you
that
ever feel
again?
that? Did you ever feel
Do I what?
any anxiety or stress when you are handling these kind of stuff?
Oh, not anymore because I'm more familiar with the industry, and I've also learned how to do journalism. That was the thing about coming to it as a freelance writer. One, I had to learn the new industry and learn the regulations and the legal framework. Excuse me, but I also learning journalism is different from just writing well. I could always write well and throughout school, but you have to catch whatever assumptions you're making in real time and make sure they're actually based on a fact that comes from somewhere credible. And it's just so easy to slip into just taking a couple of small things and running with them farther than they really can go. And learning how to catch those in your writing used to stress me out because I used to get feedback on that from editors. Now
Okay.
I don't because I know how to catch those things. And um, no, I mean it is very anxiety inducing at the beginning, but once you learn the skills you need, then then you can spend more time just engaging with the content and
Hmm.
taking for granted that you'll write something that will be received well when it's handed in instead of just hoping that you do well this time.
How have you been doing this?
I've been doing. I've been doing well. I've been given a couple of different beats. So I've covered, um, responsible gambling and tribal gaming and, emerging markets and startups. So as I've gotten these different beats, I've gotten to learn a lot more about the industry, and those have given me, greater details that I can use. And, when I receive feedback, I'm really good about, fixing problems quickly.
Hmm.
Because once you're given really concrete advice, that makes it really easy to not do it again if you will just look for it. So, and I used to take criticism really, really hard as a kid. I was always a really sensitive kid. So,
Yeah, yeah, I
once I
can
grew out of
understand it.
that, I took it. Yeah, I mean, I take it with a healthy, attitude today, but that sensitivity to criticism you can leverage into something productive in your professional life. And I've been able to do that.
How do you update yourself and how do you handle how do you update yourself about the current situation, the current political situation in the country? How do you update yourself about the current political situation? I hope you get me.
Um, Oh, about politics in my
Yeah,
country. How do
yeah,
I update myself on?
yeah.
Um, I've been reading. I mean, good news sources are a big one. So I subscribe to the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the Atlantic, but I also read voraciously. And I've been reading a lot about polling recently. There have been a few very, very good books this past year and in the past few months in particular that have um, they really pointed out some really important voting trends that are better for analyzing domestic politics in the United States, compared to just the newspapers alone and just the newsletters alone. One that I really like, I actually have it on my desk.
Sure, sure. You can
Where
show
have
it
all
to
the
us.
Democrats
You can
gone?
share with us.
Hmm?
You can share with us.
I can.
You can share the updates, right?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, so it's where have all the Democrats gone? I know I'm backwards on my screen, but it's about how the Democrats have lost working class voters since Jimmy Carter, and why. And a big part of it, for example, is the lack of a labor counterforce in the Democratic lobbying or part of the Democratic Party. So the business lobby is still strong in both parties, but the social programs that Democrats tend to support aren't enough for working class voters by themselves, and so instead of having the comfortable majority that FDR had when he passed all the progressive legislation that he passed in the late 30s and early 40s, we seesaw by elections that are always, 50-50 going into them.
Okay,
And
50.
it's because the block moves so much.
If I ask about your prediction, who is gonna win, Republicans or Democrats? What will you do? What will you say about this? Your prediction
Uh, about the difference between the two, or
about winning. Who can win the election, Republicans or Democrats? What is the ground reality? Can you share with us?
I mean, I would say it's a 50-50 chance. I mean, it's 50-50 going into pretty much every election, but I mean, Joe Biden has passed, he's been making overtures to, labor and unions in a way that previous Democrats
Uh,
haven't. And so he's taking the first steps to regain that working class part of the coalition that made Democrats so dominant from, FDR through LBJ. So that will be interesting to watch. But, again, Donald Trump is, running.
he's still
Um,
popular. Donald Trump is still popular. Am I right?
Say that again.
Donald Trump is still popular. Am I right? Actually, I have been following the debates. Nikki Haley, the ex-governor of California, if I'm not wrong. So they are definitely arguing very well. But the thing is, that's why I asked from you, who is going to win, Republicans or Democrats? Which of the parties popular on the ground right now? That's why I asked from you.
Um, yeah, I mean, I still couldn't say, it's too early to call. The thing about American voters too, there's another great book called Democracy for Realists, and it's a book-long study of how Americans actually vote and what goes into their votes. And one of the things they found, for example, on the economy, the part of the economy that most heavily determines the outcome um, of the election, as in whatever extent that it does, um, it's from the last two quarters leading up to the election. So from summer onward, that's going to be, the most important economy. It bolstered Reagan in 1984 and it killed Jimmy Carter in 1979. So
Okay, fine, fair.
again, it's hard to say. It's 50-50. I don't have a good answer or a hard answer.
Okay, okay. In navigating the
We're
legal
still
and
in no man's
regulatory
land.
complexities of sports betting in various states, how does the sports writer ensure accurate and up-to-date reporting? How do you say that?
Well, there's no way of getting around reading the bills and reading the regulations that come out afterward. It's not always fun reading, but you do learn a lot from the bill text, from who's allowed to apply for a license. Can a sports stadium apply for one, for example? That's an idea that has been considered but not very widely adopted. But like that tells you who sportsbooks will partner with when they enter those states. And the tax rates are really the big story in all those bills and the tax plans. There were some in Kentucky, for example. It finally passed a sports betting bill this past year or two, but there were six attempts to pass it. There were six different bills, and the very first one wanted to tax, handle the money that sportsbooks brought in directly. And I mean, that plan has been thrown out, and that was rejected. And I think all of the following bills decided to tax, you know, gross revenue after deductions and after payouts. So, things like that and trends like that you'll see, but there's not a lot of activity on sports betting at the federal level, so you really have to read all those state bills and state regulations.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, what strategies does the sports writer employ to capture the attention of readers and provide unique insights into the dynamic world of sports betting across different regions in the US?
Um, well, as far as engagement, I mean, you have to make the drive policy, concrete to them. You have to show them how it affects them, which a lot of the times for us means how much tax revenue is the state going to get and why. But the problem gambling stories and the responsible gambling stories will do that too. You really have to find a way to connect it to something concrete, to the person on the ground who now has access to sports betting, usually on their phone. And people love sports betting. When New Jersey on when New Jersey legalized online sports betting, it did so before New York. And so
Okay,
people would take the ferry from New York to a Starbucks in New Jersey, place their mobile bets at Starbucks, and then go back home to New York.
okay,
Um, so, I mean, it's people really love it and they respond, and you have to find those kinds of things that they really respond to.
okay, fair enough. How does the writer maintain objectivity and impartiality when covering topics related to sports betting, considering the potential impact on the industry and its stakeholders? How do you manage this?
Um, Objectivity is, I mean, for a lot of times, the numbers are the numbers and the facts are the facts. So, if you're projected to make a certain amount of money in the state, it's because of, hard numbers based on population and average wagers in different states before that. If you're talking about responsible gambling policy, which is the closest thing to a hot button in sports betting, um, there are nonprofits that do great work and great research. There are new gambling centers for gambling studies at universities that you can draw from. And as long as you're, launching your analysis from hard facts and from, good research and credible sources, um, objectivity is not difficult to maintain. I mean, sports betting is not a like hot button issue that, with a lot of very sensitive problems. I mean, it's not gun violence or abortion, it's sports betting.
Okay, could you please tell me how do you attract the people about sports betting? If someone is interested to work in sports betting and all that, So, what kind of things you will guide him or guide them? You can watch and you can see the things like this. How do you attract the people around you?
Sure. How do you get into sports betting or like chip your way into the industry to write about it?
Yeah,
So for writing in particular, I mean, obviously you have to be very good at writing and you have to improve your clarity in writing. So it's basic stuff like, eliminate unnecessary words, be clear about what you say, don't ramble, basic things like that, the functional stuff. But there's also a luck component.
okay.
But you can influence it. So when I first got my first sports writing job, it was because I wrote an article about writing as a career. It had nothing to do with sports betting to begin with. So, keep in mind that wherever you publish, you never know who's going to read your writing.
Yeah,
So you just have to get writing out there, wherever you can. If you know something, write it down and send it in. And, whether you're working your way up through blogs or newspapers, get your writing out there and, keep climbing the ladder of better and better blogs, online sites, and publications. Someone will see it.
okay, thank you, Christopher Gerlacher, for providing valuable insight into intersection of sports writing and the dynamic sports betting industry across the U.S. market. So your expertise and perspective shed light on a rapidly evolving landscape. We appreciate your time and look forward to following your continued contribution in this exciting field. Thank you once again for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I know it's late for you.
Okay, thanks. Take care. Bye.
You too. Bye.